Councilmember Scott Donahue.
Here.
Councilmember John Bowders.
Present.
Councilmember Diane Martinez.
Here.
Councilmember Ali Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Christian Patz.
Here.
Board Member Bailey Langer.
Here.
Board Member Brenda Collins.
Not here.
Not here. Board Member Barbara Inch.
Here.
Board Member Don Merriam.
Here.
And Board Member Cruz Vargas.
All right, why don't we move to agenda item 3, public comment.
So this is to the school board members that are here. On Tuesday, the city council passed a resolution. It's an anti-bullying resolution for the city of Emeryville. And one of the components of the resolution is for the community to identify bullies in our midst, I guess, and then to let them know that they're being watched, essentially. They didn't really say what the remedy was, but just to identify bullies, and that we collectively, the people of the city of Emeryville, decided we are not going to tolerate bullies, but we need to identify them. That was one of the components of the resolution that was read on Tuesday and passed unanimously. And so I let everybody there know that here at Emory Unified, the teachers en masse, 9 of them have identified a bully in the superintendent, Mr. Rubio. They identified Mr. Rubio as a bully, and they testified to that here in this room, 9 teachers. That was last spring. And then I got up and spoke, and I reminded everybody what everyone needs to remember what the definition of a bully is, and I read the dictionary definition, but suffice it to say, I don't have it in front of me, suffice it to say that there's a vital ingredient to meet the definition of the word bully, and that it needs to be a strong person being mean to, or abusing, or being hostile to, or abusive towards somebody that's weaker. And so that's why Mr. Rubio could be called a bully by the teachers, because he is the employer and they're the employees, and so that's a power relationship, and he's stronger and they're weaker. So we should bear that in mind. That's what a bully is. If I'm mean or hostile or abusive, somebody like me, to the elected officials in Emeryville, that by definition is not bullying. That's speaking truth to power, because I'm weak and you guys are strong. So when it was a weak person,
Thank you, Mr. Donahue. Your time is up.
Is appealing to strong people, that's not bullying. But Mr. Rubio was identified as a bully. Thank you.
Any additional public comment? All right, we will move on to agenda item 4, approval of the August 3rd, 2017 special meeting action minutes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to propose to make a correction, or an addition actually, to the minutes. Under items 3 and items 4.1 and 4.2, the motioners and the seconders are named, but the outcome of the votes are not listed. I believe all of those votes were unanimous, unless one of my colleagues remembers differently. So I would make a motion to approve the minutes as amended to reflect unanimous approval of items 3, 4.1, and 4.2.
I'll second.
Anyone, can I have all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Anyone against? All right, that carries unanimously as well. Any additional comments or discussion about the agenda minutes? Moving on to agenda item 5, action items. 5.1 is the discussion of the city school committee mission and purpose.
Madam Co-Chair, I was going to ask to make a motion to table this until after item 6.4, just because I think this is a lengthy discussion, and I know members of the public are here for other items, and so I was hoping we could perhaps take the reports and then just hear that after 6.4.
6.4, the discussion of the school resource officer.
Yeah, just move 5 after 6, that's all.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand. Oh, so we would be covering the entirety of item 6, informational items.
Yes.
Believe I heard a second to that. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? All right, carries unanimously. We will move to agenda item 6, information items. 6.1, review of Emeryville Center of Community Life operations and maintenance budget. Dr. Rubio?
Good evening. If I recall, I think there was a request just to bring this back just in with a revision, and so I don't think there was much more to it. Pedro, is that?
That's correct. It was just asked to be brought back to review, finalized.
Yeah, so everyone has already seen this, I believe. It was just asked to be bring back with one. I forget what the tweak was, but and Dora's mom is ill right now, so she's been in Canada with her mom, so we did attach it for your review, but I don't believe it's very different than what you've already seen.
I have a question about it. We are into the 2017-18, a certain distance. Do the expenditures, are they looking accurate to the budget? Are there any outstanding changes that you see?
Did you want to comment before I do it?
And I think Dora's working on those to bring an interim report, right, here in the near future. I believe she does in November, I believe.
Yeah, she'll be working on that in the next couple weeks. But there's no, if I understand your question, there's no big surprises for city staff or I right now in terms of the planned budget and going into 17-18, if I understand your question correctly. So no.
The one part I can add is that revenue projections look better than we projected at this time. So that's one thing we're seeing, a trend that we hope will end up better than we projected overall. So.
Any other clarifying questions about this item?
Yeah, I have one. You know, I was thinking about this the other day when I was looking at the budget, and I asked last time about who's covered by these things. My question was, do we capture city staff time in this budget as well? Because I was noticing it was mostly school staff.
We don't cover any city staff at this time.
Because I know at this point, I mean, we've been monitoring when we get to the next item, we've been monitoring the warranty items. We put a lot of time in scheduling the other stuff, and I'm just wondering why we're not capturing that in here.
It's something we can look into. It's something we've been thinking about, especially since also reservations and bookings have been increasing a lot more and taking up staff's time specifically for ECCL. So
Yeah.
something we'll bring up for our operation and maintenance discussions. And
Okay,
city-
any other clarifying questions? Okay, public comment on this item. Okay, any discussion, further discussion about the budget?
All right, let's move on to item 6.2, update on the Emeryville Center of Community Life warranty. Dr. Rubio again.
Yes, this is just a follow-up from our last meeting. We did have a number of entities with the city staff and myself, including some outside parties, one outside architectural firm who does a lot of school construction and quality control out of San Jose, and they walked through the entire facility with us, with Turner, as well as with DSK representation, with city staff and myself. When we spent about 2 weeks ago on a Monday when the students were here, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what the date was on that Monday, but we did a very thorough review. We reviewed things. I thought it was very productive. We made sure we went over everything on the warranty list, and we found some new things. And we will have a few more conversations with Turner. They have been very receptive so far, but there's one or two things we need an answer from them on. However, we have identified everything as we must before December the 5th, I think is the deadline, as you will recall, as long as things are identified. Okay, thank you. As long as the things are identified before the warranty date of December 5th, and there's some things that go beyond that. We want to make sure those are identified so those are covered.
Any clarifying questions?
Yeah. At the school board meeting, I asked you what was the cost of that inspection, and I wasn't clear whether they were inspectors or whether they were consultants.
Yes. Hold on one second. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to, there's something being delivered at the same time. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure what your question was.
My question was, I had asked you the cost of the inspection or the consultant, and you had said you did not know because Swinnerton had hired them.
No, well, we actually asked two different firms to be here. Swinnerton agreed to pay for it. I said to you last week in the school board meeting, last Wednesday, that I wasn't too concerned about what the amount of the bill was because Swinnerton is paying for it, as you requested, I think as a group. And
But
so they've agreed to do that, so I don't know the amount of the bill. I haven't received the bill yet.
You have not received the bill,
That's
which
correct.
is different than what you actually said, but thank you.
Okay.
Any additional clarifying questions?
So the city council offered an amount of money to do.
That's the next item, Scott.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I don't have anything. Just public comment on this.
Any public comment?
Okay, first of all, I wanted to say that I noticed there wasn't the handout here for the council members to see that there was at the school board meeting, but the handout showed the details of the warranty items. And one of the items in there was, there's a huge red flag for me. And the reason why it's a red flag for me is because I'm a contractor. I build buildings for a living. And apparently there's a lot of doors here on the property that are rubbing, or the doors are maintained as a rectangle, but the door frame or the surround of the door is turning into a parallelogram, meaning moving relative to the door, and so it's causing doors to stick here in the ECCL. And the reason given, according to the handout, was that the building is settling and therefore not covered by the warranty. But I'm in the business, and new buildings don't settle. Buildings built in the Victorian era settle. New buildings don't settle, so you need to find out about that. Why should we accept that? Why is that considered not under warranty? How much settling is there going to be? And then the next thing, so you should ask that tonight. How much settling is there going to be? Okay, then the last thing I wanted to say was quickly, the Swinnerton paying for the inspector. That's sort of like Turner paying for the inspector. We need an independent inspector, not one that's on Swinnerton's payroll, who has a vested interest in not finding things wrong. So we need to get to the bottom of, the council needs to get to the bottom of the who's paying for the inspections, and watch out for possible conflicts of interest. Thanks.
Any further public comment? We'll move now to discussion.
So I want to respond to that. I heard Rubio say that he selected the firm to come do the inspection. Swinnerton's merely paying for it. Sorry. So my impression, and I'm seeing a nod telling me I'm right, was that it was an independent party selected by the district. We're just going to hand the bill to Swinnerton.
Two
You
parties.
picked two parties.
Yes.
And so that I just want to clarify that, because I think
Thank you.
that's, yeah. I mean, let's be honest.
I have done some construction and been involved in construction, partly because of public art. I end up using engineers. And this issue that I just heard about building settlements, it has me concerned too. Normally, in today's construction, the foundations compact the soil to a specified amount. Normally, in today's construction, there's compaction that really does reduced settlement, that the soils are specified compacted to a certain level. And so I'm also concerned about that issue, and it just seems like, that could be long-term troubles and expensive, and, our city could be on the hook for that, so I am concerned.
And let me just add a little bit of information, and Pedro can correct me if I have this wrong. As we've been looking together at all the things on the warranty list, this particular item, I believe it was innocent. A city staff member suggested that maybe that was the cause, and so that's how it occurred on the list. So it was just an innocent suggestion. We have no reason to believe that that's necessarily the reason.
Right, I think it was thrown out there as one of the possible
Yeah,
issues, and then
yeah.
actually Turner, after that meeting, said they would follow up with us, and we're going to have those are one of the handful of items that we're going to go back to Turner and discuss and see what the issue really is and how that can be corrected.
I'd like to add something here. Based on talking about compaction, Member Donahue had mentioned, I believe the project hired a special inspection to basically test the soil for compaction during the process. We can look back at all the testing reports that were filed with the project and the state architect, so that should be able to warrant any or flesh out any issue there. If it didn't pass compaction, it would have been a red flag, at least in my experience has been. And then from there, we had 2 full-time inspector of records that were hired by the state, not by the, hired by the district, but they were state certified inspectors. So as far as the verbiage that was used to describe a door settling, I believe it was kind of improperly, at least in my opinion, is that how it was described. It may have been the hinge or the rail and stile system of the door may be maybe needs to be looked at, but as far as the building settlement, I wouldn't consider it being a concern.
Do we have any further discussion?
It would have been nice. It would have been nice for that list to have been provided this evening, so we actually had some point of reference as to where we are with the warranty items. It's been provided in the past, so I was surprised. Is there a reason we didn't get it tonight?
I didn't think of it as an attachment needed. Can send it out after this meeting tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
On the list here, if this is it, it says, number 88, doors rubbing, warranty denied, caused by settlement. Is that the city that wrote that, or is that the inspector?
No, this was written up and then response after what the email was sent to Turner saying, hey, is this possible settlement or some other reason why this door is doing that? They responded
so
back,
this was-
it could be possible settlement and not covered, but we're going to follow up with Turner.
Okay.
Pedro, do you have the doors that are at issue? Do you have know which doors are at issue?
They're on this side of the building right here.
The courtyard side?
Yes, on building
Okay.
C on the
All
courtyard
right, thank
side.
you.
There's a couple also on that side also, building C, more than one. Or we found more than one, definitely that walkthrough, so that's why we're following up, since we found more on that walkthrough. And it was September 25th when we did that walkthrough.
Well, there's one more here that's a little disturbing, which is standing water under the community canvas covered walkway. And it's number 80, and that would indicate, it says installed as instructed. It would just indicate maybe that's a design flaw, meaning the architects did not specify the amount of pitch for drainage or something like that. So there could be,
Mr. Chair, I think it's a situation where the canopy was created under a huge pine tree that sheds consistently. So it's just the idea of the way it's shaped and where the drainage is, it's going to get full of leaves. It's a huge flaw, but it's not
okay, so it's
an architectural,
there is-
construction flaw.
there is drainage, but it's actual leaves and
No,
debris.
yeah, leaves and debris. yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just noticed it because I get rained on when I take my kids to school.
All right, let's move to item 6.3. This is the update on audit of Emeryville Center of Community Life with Dr. Rubio again.
Yes, this is just to give an update to the council and board as a joint group that the school board took action at the last school board meeting to take a vote and to vote no on doing any kind of audit on the ECCL construction property.
I'd like to present a little bit more on that.
Sure.
As Dr. Rubio mentioned, we heard from a number of the key players in the project. I can't remember exactly who was there. It was there were the architect, these
Outside firm,
inspectors that you had hired.
our financial auditor, Swinnerton, that's correct, and Turner.
So we heard from all these players and talked about the sort of various types of audits that we could bring. We talked about financial, structural, bidding. There are a number of items, and essentially, from my perspective, the consensus was that we heard from each of those key players and outside auditors, and there was nothing presented to us and nothing that we've heard in the past that would indicate any, misconduct or serious financial misgivings that we had or serious flaws with the building. And that was, from my perspective, the basis of the vote.
Madam Chair, did you discuss how much an audit would cost?
It's to a certain degree. We heard some estimates.
And what were those estimates?
It varied by type of audit, and my colleagues may remember better than I do, but in terms of, I do remember the financial audit. If you're looking at, well, first of all, we do have a financial audit. There was a type of financial audit conducted to make sure that we were compliant with Measure J, and the gentleman that presented on that estimated that I believe he called it a forensic audit, which you have to look at each year. He estimated it would be, I believe, $7,500 per year to review records. That was one. And then I can't, does anyone remember the other?
About $40,000 to $60,000.
Member, I think that had to do with the sample. It wasn't a whole audit, it was a sample.
I'm sorry, so you're right. Their fee was $7,500 per year to do a sample audit. So he estimated it would be 2 to 3 times that amount per year to conduct a forensic audit of the financial components. In terms of the structural audit, I believe, was that in the 40 to 60,000 range?
For the construction.
Right. I believe those were the estimates that we received.
The general consensus including from the outside architectural firm that does quality control, was that they didn't see any surprises. They're typical things on the warranty list that they saw, and that similar to the other opinions that were expressed that night, that we have a safe and beautiful facility without any critical issues.
Any further clarifying questions before public comment? All right, we will call for public comment now.
Well, I'm hearing the school board and the superintendent do a lot of hand-wringing. You're telling us that you don't see any reason why there should be an audit. But why? Well, of course you don't. If you saw a reason for an audit, you would have fixed it, like moving forward. The problem isn't that we don't need an audit because you can't see anything wrong. The problem is we might need an audit because you can't see anything wrong. That's the whole idea of an audit. Who does audits? San Francisco Unified School District. They do audits for every large project they do. And routinely, they find major things wrong that they didn't know, they couldn't foresee. That's why they do the audits, and other school districts too, but San Francisco routinely does it. And they routinely capture more in paybacks or clawbacks than they pay out for the audits. So we can't afford this and we don't see anything wrong are not reasons. And now the superintendent's leaving the room. Okay, I guess I'm going to, can you stop the clock, please?
Mr. Donahue, you should continue.
No, I want to have the superintendent hear my conversation. Stop the clock, please, until the superintendent returns.
Mr. Donahue, would you like to continue with your public comment?
Yes, but could you, the clock should be stopped when the superintendent leaves the room, because I intend to have him hear what I'm saying as
The clock was stopped, and when you
Okay, thank you very
continue,
much.
it will be
Okay,
started again.
Again, in case Mr. Rubio didn't hear, the idea of an audit is not because, you don't do one because you know you need to do one. You do one because it's what you don't know. Now he's effectively left the room. I request,
Sir,
could the
please carry
superintendent
on.
please be here, present here and now?
Sir, if you'd like to make a public comment, we are hearing you
I
in
hereby
public
request, could
comment.
the superintendent please be here and now in the meeting? It's pretty important. I mean, could you please?
Mr. Donahue, I'm having food delivered for my daughter, and I'm trying to manage that while I'm trying to
Okay,
listen to you.
every time he does
Sir-
that, let's stop the clock,
Sir,
please.
the public comment is for the benefit of the board. Dr. Rubio is not a member of the board. He
No,
is-
but I intend, he's here because you have determined it's valuable for him to be here, and so I agree with that assessment.
So you are speaking to the board.
And Dr. Rubio.
If you would like to
and-
continue,
and
I will give
other
you
people
one
here
more
that
minute.
are not elected officials, but
I
you've
will give you
determined
one
that they
more
should-
minute. If you would like to continue your
Okay.
public comment, when that minute expires, your public comment period will be over.
If you glance over, you'll see he's not here and now in the present, again. Okay, so I would like to request to please, could the superintendent, could you please stop the meeting when you need to leave? So, because I think it's important. I agree with the board that the superintendent needs to be here and present and hearing the deliberations. So that's what I would request. So again, in case you didn't hear, the purpose of an audit is not to affirm what you know. It's to find out what you don't know. That's the whole idea. So the two reasons that were given here for why there should not be an audit are bogus reasons. Those are not legitimate reasons. So I think you should discuss that. Thank you.
Any additional public comment? I would like to now open it up for discussion among the committee.
So I just wanted to say I was very unimpressed with the people that came forward and spoke that Dr. Rubio asked to present, and he had waited and postponed the audit so that these people could attend, because they were basically people that would say what he wanted them to say. I was very unimpressed with the consultant that wrote us a letter. I wish it was included here, saying that everything was fine, and there was not somebody who performs audits here. There were financial people that checked that the items were adequate with the Measure J requirements to be billed, but there was nobody here that talked about an audit, and I was very unsatisfied. I thought it was very haphazard and one-sided, and I was very disappointed, frankly.
I'm not sure. With all due respect, so everybody knows, there were people in the room who do audits. There was a construction firm that does construction performance audits. There was our financial auditor, and one of the outside firms, just so we're clear on this, was recommended by our financial auditor out of San Diego. So just with all due respect, I want to make sure that's well known by everybody.
And in response to that, then I wonder why we had so much difficulty declaring or deciding what we were asking for, what an audit was, or we had a vague description of what an audit might cost, and people were very nebulous and unclear and unable to give us really solid answers. $40,000 to $60,000. People were up there going, well, I'm not really sure what you're asking for, what type of audit this would be. So I didn't really feel that anybody there was actually truly invested in explaining the benefits of, what, if they are an auditor, what they do and how they could benefit us. Thank you.
Any additional discussion?
I'm not sure discussion is what it matters at this point. I think this is kind of a dead issue. The school board has, I always love these votes. They've voted that they're not going to do anything. which I don't know why that takes a vote. I've never understood that, and if I ever make a motion to say we're not going to do something, please remind me that I'm saying you actually just don't take a motion. You don't need to vote to not do something. But I did watch the discussion. I followed this along, and for me, I'm just deeply saddened by wasting an opportunity to say to the community, you know what, we hear you, we're going to make sure this was all clean, and we're just going to do it. The city's offered to pay their share. You know, we put money on the table, and it's amusing to me, 21%, doing the quick math, that's exactly what they were projecting your costs would have been. 100,000, we offered to pay our share of 20,000. That's good news for you, Pedro. You've got 20 grand back in the account for FF&E. But it just was an opportunity for the district to stand up and say, we've got nothing to hide. We're proud of our project. We're proud of what we did here. And we're going to show you that it's clean by putting an audit out there. And, you know, it was disturbing to watch because at the end there was a celebratory high five that we're going to hide things. And it was done under the guise of, oh, we're going to shift this money to education. And that's not the way these funds work. This is, you guys have money, you sold more bonds to finish this project. That money is locked into the project, and the final piece of the project would have been an audit. The COC, which is one of the major oversight pieces, presented 2 reports, and I don't understand why those weren't done in the years that they were supposed to have been done, but you were even playing catch-up on the night of the audit question. The fact that you didn't see the myriad number of irregularities and say, you know what? We took a long time to get here, and we're going to wrap it up in a nice tight bow is just amazing to me. You had an opportunity, and you didn't take a swing, and that just shocks me. So, you know, hooray.
I would just like to say that I dispute your celebratory high five that we're hiding things characterization. I think that's not at all what happened and mischaracterizes the entire discussion.
Okay.
Well, I do think it shows that you did not understand how the budget works, where money comes from, and that if money had been spent on an audit, that's not money that you now have to spend on education or children, and it was a little distasteful.
I'm going to add my 2 cents here. I'm going to let the system work as it's supposed to work. I deal with this on a daily basis. I just was back at a project that's happening in Palo Alto, and it's under a $275 million bond issue. And as far as what's warranting an audit, I'm going to let the IOR stand its ground because we hired them through state approval. I'm going to let the contracting process stand as it is because of what the process entails as far as signing off on what expenditures are done, and it's basically the subcontractors have been paid through the proper means as far as their pay applications. And I'm going to say that overall, as far as Doris, Sue, and the financial department of the district also oversaw it along with the COC. So with all those entities, I'm gonna bear on that as far as making sure that that was done properly. But as far as an outside audit, I'm comfortable with my decision.
All right, let's move on to item 6.4, discussion of school resource officer. I believe Dr. Rubio and Member Cruz have some discussion with this item.
Yes, this item has kind of come up over the year or so past on and off informally, and I believe we have some members in the audience who wanted to speak to it. I believe there used to be a number of years ago a school resource officer that was available. I don't believe they were stationed here. I think they were here occasionally to interact with the students, and this is something I haven't given even much thought of as what in terms of what exactly we're talking about in terms of the concept. Is it a full-time person stationed here, which schools in the country do, which I'm sure many of us have opinions of, versus someone who comes and throws a football once in a while with the kids? But Member Vargas, did you want to add anything on what you have in mind?
I do, yes. I just wanted to relay that I guess the school board would like to relay to city council members here that is the desire from the majority, the vast majority of parents in the school, that it's the desire of the vast majority of teachers in our school, and also the desire of our experienced police officers that have had experience in these type of programs. It's a desire to have a school resource officer in our campus, and we like to ask the city council if there's any particular reservations that you might have for funding such a resource.
I envision this as sort of an initial discussion, just to sort of lay the groundwork. Any clarifying questions for Dr. Rubio or Member Vargas?
I have a question. How do you know the desires of the majority of parents? And I know you attended a recent PTO meeting where you posed that question to about 8 to 10 people.
There were about 20 parents present.
I was at that meeting too.
About 20 parents present at the time that you were not there, at the time that question was posed. One of them was your husband. So your husband was able to hear firsthand how again the majority of parents feel it is a great opportunity for us.
So, I'm sorry, the majority of parents at that meeting?
At that meeting, yes, absolutely.
So yeah, so I'm just saying what you actually said was the majority of parents at the school. So are you extrapolating from that poll of the parents at the PTO meeting that reflects the desires of the entire school?
Can I step in here for a second? Sure. I understand this is a difficult subject. I would just ask that we come into this topic with an open mind.
I actually do want to hear from the
excuse
parents.
Me,
so absolutely.
Excuse me. I don't believe that Member Vargas meant the entire school. And again, this is just to kick off the discussion.
Okay.
So if you have clarifying questions, please ask them. But
that was my question, and he did say that the desire of the majority of the parents
Absolutely.
at the school.
Absolutely, and the school board has the privilege to be close to a lot of activities and events where parents are present, and I can speak to especially in back to school night where I was able to walk 3 of the 4 floors and enter all the classrooms and ask that question to both teachers and parents. And again, overwhelmingly, the desire and the experience that parents post around this particular topic is that they've all expressed very positive experiences with police officers. And when I say the vast majority, I do mean the vast majority. If that's the reservation, then what I'd recommend that we do is that in the professional world is that you basically do market research, and then we'd be able to go that route. And
I would be interested,
if that is the
rather than
excuse me.
I have a clarifying question.
So clarifying questions. Let's keep this to clarifying questions. Member Vargas, I would ask just answer the question, and then we'll move to public comment, and then we'll move into further discussion.
So I also heard majority. I heard majority for the parents, but I also heard you speaking for the board. And I watched the board agenda very closely, and I don't remember a discussion on this at a board agenda item. So I want to clarify, are you speaking for the whole board?
If you go back to the last meeting that we had, it was the majority of the majority of the board members that expressed their desire to support this item here today.
You had an agendized conversation?
That's absolutely 100% not true.
We spoke about this during the future agenda items, and you can see comments from the majority of the members. However, if you can ask, maybe during the comment section, we can hear from the rest of the board members on this.
I'm going to ask a clarifying question, so I'll ask it again. There was a vote taken, and the board supported the idea of an SRO.
I believe I don't recall specifically. Was there a vote taken to have this agenda item put on the agenda, or it was just
A future agenda item.
For future agenda item.
for future agenda
For a future
items?
agenda item.
So
That's very different than saying the board supports it. It says the board supports talking about it.
talking about it.
And that's, just wanted to clarify that words matter.
And fortunately, we can hear from the majority of the board members today, so you will hear firsthand the opinion of everybody here.
I want to,
And again, I go back to my question. Please don't speak for them unless a vote has been taken. There's sort of rules of procedure around that. I'm happy to help you find them if you'd like.
I want to make sure I understood what you said about the cost. Did you say that the city would pay for this?
I did not say anything of that. My understanding is that this is funded by the city. That's my understanding.
Is there any public comment?
Hi. My name is Mark Davis. I've been a teacher in this district for 20-plus years. I'm the president of the Teachers Union here, and I want to speak to my experience with an RSO and the interaction between our students and the Emeryville Police Department. I came here in 1997, and we had a school resource officer, and it was very helpful for many of our students. It kept them back in school if they were out playing hooky. It avoided, got kids back in where they needed to be so that they could work towards graduation. The students themselves had a good relationship. I remember Officer White would come in and he'd show up in the evening, you know, just to play pickup ball with them. But they had a good bond, very good relationship. He was not assigned here like, you know, a security guard. He was someone who was called in to help someone. And he was present, and then he'd be gone. Sometimes I had other officers in, and they might show up in civilian, you know, suit jacket or whatever. If they're on duty, they showed up in their uniform. I don't recall them carrying a gun. And I know that today, with the atmosphere out there, that there's a lot of negative feelings about police and schools. But I would caution everybody not to paint with one brush, that this department right here, over time, has been very positive for our students. And I've 20 years in the classroom here every day, all right, and I've been with these kids, and I took classes. Because of that, I brought police into my classroom. And before I did, I had students write an essay. I said, tell me, a pre-write, what is your opinion of the police department? And they ragged on them, right? Trashed them. Then the officer came in, led by Captain Lou Collier, who's now retired. And first question he asks is, how many of you hate the cops? Every hand goes up, including Captain Collier.
Mr. Davis, I'll ask you to wrap up your comment. Okay. Your public period is over.
Thank you. Please consider this. This is good for kids. This is good for the city.
Thank you. Any additional public comment?
Hi, I'm Lauren LaPlante. I'm the district school psychologist. I've been in the district for 11 years, and I've had very frequent interactions with the police because as the licensed mental health professional on campus, I deal with the police on a very frequent basis. And what I can say from my experience is when we've had an SRO, these situations, whether they're students who are having suicidal thoughts, or they might have made some kind of threat, or we've had rare instances with potential involvement with being trafficked, really serious issues. And when we've had an SRO, kids have felt comfortable. These officers know how to talk to kids. I don't have to coach them. They already know how to make kids feel comfortable and safe. I think there's a lot of misperceptions about SROs in school. And really, they're on campus as a prevention, and they reduce criminalizing students and prevent criminalizing students. I have some information from the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing about SROs. So there's 3 main roles that SROs play. One is as a safety expert, One is as a problem solver or a link to community resources, and one is as an educator. And so I can't tell you how many teachers say, like, oh, when we had a police officer do reading buddies in our class, it was so amazing. And you're just really changing those relationships and those perceptions. So we've really had a long history since I've been here of having an SRO, and then several years ago, I think it was due to staffing issues that we no longer had access to one. And I can say that it's been much more difficult since then because we don't know who we're going to deal with, and they may or may not have a real facility with interacting with students. Some of the research on the effectiveness of SROs is reducing offending behavior, reducing truancy, creating a safer school environment, improvements in academics, and improved police-student relationships. So I very strongly support having an SRO on our campus. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Please step forward to the microphone.
Okay, so I would, first of all, I'd ask Ms. Langner to please do a better job, more judicious job cutting off the speakers that speak too long. Try to make fair and equal treatment under the law is what I'm
I
requesting.
usually let you wrap up your thought as well, Mr. Donahue.
But I'm asking if you try to do a better job, try to, in other words, have it be the same for each speaker. If you could try for that, that would be good. All right, so the idea of cops teaching or helping with education, I'm sorry, they're not pedagogical experts. They don't know anything about pedagogy. They're not trained in that. That's creepy to me. We shouldn't be hiring cops to be educating children. And then I wanted to just say, the whole notion of cops on campus to me is creepy. I think you could make an argument for it, but it should be only as a very special circumstance. And then all of this discussion about how great it would be to have officers here on the campus that the city pays for are all dependent on the officer that's here being like an exemplary cop. I think it's true. If we had an exemplary cop here, I think it'd probably be a good thing. What if we have a cop that's not exemplary? And that's, of course, the problem. And so I see nothing but problems here. It's creepy to me. And then the last thing I want to say is school board member Vargas, trying to sell this thing by deceptive means here is extremely creepy. I thank the members that called, the city council members that called him out. And lastly, again to Ms. Langner, Ms. Martinez here was asking clarifying questions, and you're interrupting her because it sounded like you didn't like the content. It was clearly clarifying questions, and you're supposed to be being fair and equitable application of the procedure, and I think you should just do a better job. Thank you.
Any additional public comment?
Ruth Major. Just a couple of things, and while I agree that the research does show that it helps students to relate to police and other people of authority, I'm confounded a little because the school is so small, and it's so open to relationships and relationship building that, I mean, to me, it's an exquisite place to make relationships happen. And if that were to happen in this community, there would be no need to bring in other people. This is a community for learning. It's a community that should be supporting the children and families that are here, as well as the staff and teachers. And I don't understand why it's not working and why there's such tensions, and that it's not a relationship-based educational learning situation. And that does concern me at multiple levels. So as one of the residents, and I feel a stakeholder, I'm not happy with that step being taken. Thank you.
Judy Timmel, resident. I'm all for students getting extra support in any way possible. I'm sure that there are a multitude of needs that our students have. I would much rather see this money going to social workers, mental health professionals, other kinds of people who are trained to see problems, to help deal with them. I don't believe a police officer is in any way qualified to deal with the multitude of issues that occur in this kind of situation. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to discussion from the board. Yes, go ahead.
I've got a few comments here. I find it a little strange that, you know, at city council meetings and with the POA, we discussed how we expect officers to be first responders to mental health issues, and that's an unfair burden on them. It's not necessarily what they're trained for, how we definitely need more mental health support in the field for officers. And then on the flip side, we're talking about, oh, but officers are totally well equipped for the psychological upbringing of children in a school. Like, those two things do not seem to conflate for me. These are police officers. I did some brief reading on SROs prior to coming today. There do not seem to be really high standards of training for relating to children. I'm sure if Emeryville police sent over one, they'd be a fantastic person. However, there are a lot of issues with school resource officers. We've seen videos. I don't think they're misperceptions. I think we've all seen the videos on the internet of children being beaten, choked, slammed to the ground by police in schools. And so that's not a misperception. That's a valid concern. Suspension levels are higher for minority children in heavily secure schools. And that is a problem for me and not a thing that I want to contribute to. I also haven't really heard a clear example of why we need one and what they would be doing. Anything from being here all the time to throwing a football around is just way too broad of a category for me. So I'm pretty firmly opposed unless I see a much more thorough and researched proposal here.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So I just want to get back to the points that I was trying to get to with my clarifying questions. I just want to express to Member Cruz that I am very interested in what the parents in this community have to say and what they think. I do take issue with your suggestion that we would need to market to them this idea, because that presents a position, I think, saying, hey, I think that SROs are a good idea. What do you think? I would rather say to the community, what do you think of an SRO being on this campus? And I'd like to hear from all parents, because if I'm not mistaken, I'm the only parent of a child in this district here at this table, and I don't remember being asked. So I don't appreciate you speaking for me as a parent. We've never had this conversation before, and I would truly like to know what informed parents, you know, once they're informed of all of the issues that Councilmember Medina brought up, all of the positive attributes as well that were brought up by the president of our teachers group. I'd like people to be armed with facts rather than just casually asked, hey, what do you think about, have you had good experiences with an officer on campus? Because I'll tell you the truth, my child is in this district, but he is half white. His father's an attorney. His mother's on city council. He's privileged. So you know what? Having a cop on campus will be great for him. He loves EPD. Anytime that we can get into the police station, anytime that he could get a free water bottle or throw a Frisbee with one of our officers, he takes that chance. They also hand out chips. He'll take every kind. However, the majority of the children in our district are black. Many of them are low income. Many of them qualify for free meals. They have a different experience culturally with police officers. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I would like to hear from them and their families to see what they really think. And I wouldn't want to market to them like, here's a great idea that we're bringing to you. I would want them to come with their own ideas and have an open public discussion about what the families in Emeryville want for their children.
Thank you. I'd like to reply to that. That's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I have over 10 years of experience in market research. That's my field, marketing. And the number one rule of market research is that you should never introduce a bias. In fact, I personally mediated quite a handful of focus groups myself. So rest assured, there were no bias introduced in that discussion, in that mini focus group that we held with during the PTO session. I like your idea. One of my recommended next steps is, if you do want to firmly and with conviction and with close to zero margin of error to conduct professional research on this regard, you should probably expect to spend anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000 to be sure to contact every single parent.
Open forum. I'd like an open public meeting.
If you like to do it that way. Conversely, I like your idea. I think it would be great for us to have hold a public discussion. That's an awesome idea.
I like the idea of a public discussion too, Councilmember Martinez, and I think that was, from my perspective, part of the reason of getting this agenda item on tonight was to gauge the City Council's interest and get some ideas from you as to how we could proceed further. And I think, Member Vargas, I believe you were thinking of some sort of public forum or public discussion, and this is again just sort of kicking that off and getting started on that discussion.
What I'm hearing from my perspective is that having a non-teacher on campus in a recognized profession, in this case police officer, matters. So many professions, it's hard to say what they are. Police officers have a uniform. I would want to see maybe a variety of people in identifiable uniforms showing up. Not necessarily police officers. It'd be great to have a surgeon show up on campus, a bus driver. Like we could just somehow recruit a variety of people. I mean, this is what I'm hearing, is that I don't necessarily think that from a teenager, children, small person point of view, that it's necessarily a police officer that's so reassuring and exciting. Maybe it's someone in a uniform. And, that we need to, I think we need to do some testing to see if that's it. I mean, I'm curious about that. And, I think it might be a great thing for our students to have all kinds of people in specialized uniforms coming to visit. I think it would be encouraging to them.
Yes, Member Pats.
So this is an item that's near and dear to me, and I'm sorry, Mayor Donahue, I love where you take things sometimes, so I'm bemused by Career Day, because that's not what I heard. I heard hearkening back to the halcyon days of 1997 when Emory Secondary School had a population over 300 kids and had a campus to itself and had different challenges in the 90s. I think you and I, Mayor, are two of the people up here old enough to remember the 90s. And so going through this, that's not where we are today. I follow the school district. It's near and dear to my heart. You have 167 high school kids right now. I'm sorry, that's your average daily attendance. I don't know your enrollment. I asked for enrollment, I didn't get it. So I'm going off of what was reported to the state last year. So it's 167 is your average daily attendance at the high school. I think the enrollment's like 180, about half of what it was back in the 90s. I heard some reasons that having a school resource officer was really helpful. I heard a word I love, hooky, kids playing hooky, and then I heard the terrible T word, truancy, and that's where I have problems. Playing hooky is one thing, it's kind of jovial and fun. It's what white kids of privilege do. Truancy is what kids with tans do. It's a crime, it's breaking the law, they need to be arrested, and it's something that I don't like. It's why I don't like the idea of a school resource officer. It reframes it from behavior into criminality, and that was one of the big issues that I heard. I heard talk of behavior, and I heard talk of mental health needs And again, things that I have worked in the mental health field for a long time in education. And I keep looking at your numbers. There are 13 administrators on this campus, and that's a 1 to 53 ratio. Again, using your report out from your budget in the spring, so I see some puzzled look, but that's the number you report out. I think that might include Dora Sue and a few other people. But we know from best practices that everybody that is on a campus is going to interact with kids. You have 51 teachers. That's a 1 to 14 ratio. You have 17 classified employees. Total staff to students is about 1 to 10 adults per child on this campus. You have trained mental health staff on this campus. You have a wonderful school psychologist. I'm envious of her quality, and she has interns. I don't know if you have 1 or 2 this year, too. So you have mental health professionals. We built a healthcare facility right here on campus with mental health people. I looked up on Lifelong Medical to see what they actually have there. It's not up to speed yet, but you have doctors, you have mental health professionals. So I thought, well, maybe transportation was something that you guys needed help with. I know there's problems with pickup and drop off, but I looked, you're supposed to have a transportation coordinator, so that's not it. So when I go through the list and I hear what people talk about, all I'm left with is the Police Athletic League. And that's great. Bring them on board. When I was in a classroom, they gave me money. We bought baseball mitts and basketballs and developed that relationship. It tied into what Mayor Donahue was talking about. It was seeing police officers in a different light. Very different than having an officer that I don't just see any numbers that support it. When I see schools with SROs, I see large inner-city schools, 2,500 plus kids, and an officer there, which makes sense. Oakland PD has 1.65 officers for every 1,000 residents. If you think about it, officers work 3 shifts a day, right? So that's about 1.65. You divide that by 3, and you're about half an officer for every 1,000 people at any given time. And I used Oakland, not Emeryville, because we're weird. We balloon up like Las Vegas. And so when you do the math down to less than 200 high school kids, the amount of time you would need from a school resource officer is barely lunch. So I just don't understand this ask. I didn't understand it when it was there. And I'll leave with, I can give you overwhelming amounts of research on SROs. There is some debate, but again, it's a matter of scale. But The Atlantic, I picked it not because it was scholarly, although I think their writing quality is excellent. It's an easy read. From last year, cops versus counselors. If you want to solve your problems, and you have behavior problems on this campus, I'm hearing it from the people talking, it's not going to be solved by a police officer that's going to scare kids who have negative interactions, and I'll let Mr. Bowders speak to that. You're going to solve it by providing services. We built this place to provide those services. When we get into discussion, wellness is what our focus should be, not the police. They're too busy trying to figure out who's taking all our laptops out of our cars, okay? And if you need them, I love Emeryville because the response time is nothing. So as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't waste your time with the town hall because you're going to have a difficult time convincing me that you can justify it. The flip side is if you really want one and it's a priority for you, great. Apple does it with us all the time. Cost for a police officer that you would need, I'm sure we could keep it around $100,000 per year. Good luck with that.
Yes, Member Bowders.
So, thank you for putting this on the agenda. And thank you for, even though this is a subject I have a really hard time with, I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about it a little bit. So, the entire essence of what I do in my full-time job is tied to this issue. And so it's hard for me, and listening to folks, I had to keep reminding myself of the fact that I have some exposure and experience with this issue that perhaps others at this committee don't have. I just want to frame what I want to say about this with a couple things. 2.1 million young people who attend secondary or high school or grade school are arrested in the United States every year. And 1.7 million of that 2.1 million children are prosecuted, and they obtain a criminal record. And of the number of children who are sent to state prison, charged as adults, middle school and high school age kids in many states, 58% of them are African American. African Americans constitute 16% of students in the United States, okay, to give you a scope of what the trajectory of that looks like. The single greatest determinant for why a person ends up incarcerated as an adult is because they were convicted and incarcerated as a child. That is the single greatest determinant factor. And we have a major problem in the United States of putting children who are usually of color in a pipeline from the school to the prison. And in my work, I see children not where you see them, here on a playground or in your classroom. I see children when they are now adults. And I see children after they have been victims at home, in their community, children who experience adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, which I'm sure you are familiar with, who have trauma in their lives. I see them when they are no longer a victim because the treatment that they never got for the issues they have has manifested itself into behaviors that make them a criminal when they're 16, 17, 18, and beyond. And when the work I do on trauma-informed care for children is generated by what we see in juvenile hall and adult prison. And when we talk to kids who are products of the foster care system, kids who grow up in very difficult neighborhoods, who go to schools that have challenges, there are some very common themes. And one of the most disturbing things that I heard no one speak to tonight is the fact that school resource officers in many communities are actually a source for this process. So there are studies that have been done where school resource officers are not trained. They are police first. They are taught to be police. They are not taught to be child caregivers, child educators, child health providers. That is not their primary training and purpose. And so it's not that police officers can't or are incapable of being a mentor, being a positive role model. That is not what I'm saying. But that is not their primary purpose. And so when they encounter children who are acting like children, their instinct in many cases is to treat them with the training that they know. And so my problem with this discussion is, this is from the perspective of what do teachers or parents want? And you know what? I respect that. Parents need to make decisions for their children. Teachers need to be able to discipline and manage their classroom. But not one person thus far has talked about what do the children need. And I'm here to tell you what my experience with this issue teaches me about children. I had a client once when I practiced law. I was a defense attorney, and I did jury trials for people who were charged with crimes and lived in public housing buildings. And I had a client who she and her husband had 2 children, and her husband's brother had been released from prison, and he was living in the spare bedroom in their unit. And it was a Saturday morning in winter, and her 6-year-old, in his pajamas, sat there with a bowl of cereal and watched cartoons like any normal child should be able to do. And unknown to the family, the brother who was out of prison was dealing in illicit substances out of the back of their unit. And a SWAT team raided that unit that morning. And that child was exposed in his home to the experience of adult police officers engaging with an adult person who engaged in a crime. When he went to school Monday morning, a school resource officer, in the most friendly and benign manner possible, asked him, "Do you have lunch money?" And he wet himself in the hallway. It is not about what we think is most appropriate from a teaching or a parental. It is what do children need. Children need to grow and learn with other children. They are not capable of understanding adult relationships, especially of the kind that are of a carceral nature. Children do not comprehend what Black Lives Matter means and why it matters to their mother, or why their uncle was arrested in their home by a bunch of people wearing uniforms, the same uniform that gets worn at the school outside the lunchroom. Children do not process that. And what we find is that it creates toxic stress on the brain of children who are overexposed to police in their environment. And what does that lead to? Lower educational attainment, lower health scores, lower employment trajectory, lower self-worth, higher suicide rates, extremely high incarceration rates, higher teen pregnancy, higher transmission of STDs. All of those things are linked to treating children as if they are criminals. And it doesn't mean that the school resource officer walks in and says, these kids are all future convicts. But the school resource officer doesn't know what is going on in the home community of the child. And the truth is that Black and brown neighborhoods are over-policed, they are over-criminalized, and children do not need, especially children of color, do not need to go to school and think that the only person who can solve their social problem, the normal interactions we have as people, is a police officer. They need to learn skills to solve problems for themselves. They need to learn that their teacher, that their mental health counselor, that people who they see at recess as their monitors, the moms and dads who volunteer at after-school programs, that those people can help children overcome problems too. Conflict resolution specialists, people who could come in here and at a fraction of the cost of a police officer, train teachers and staff in this district on how to help children solve their own problems. I have sat through actual restorative justice circles where children who commit harm against other children on the playground, the whole class gets involved in helping not to decide punishment, but to decide how do we restore your space in our group? How do we make all of ourselves whole? How do we lift the voice of the child who is the victim, and instead of harming and punishing the child who commit the wrong, how do we teach them the right way, and how do we integrate them back into the community? And it is so important, now more than ever, for Black and brown kids, as Councilmember Martinez very aptly pointed out, noted, to have that space. And so I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate everyone listening to me on this item. I had a lot more that I was prepared to say, but I think I've said enough. And I'm not afraid to have the discussion, but I really would ask folks who, whether you're thinking of this as from a marketing perspective or otherwise, this isn't about marketing and putting this out to parents and teachers and asking people to decide what is the best thing. This is about children. And the safety of children is often the last thing we actually think about. We all think we know what's best for them, but all of the data, all of the information about what goes on in little children's brains, how they socially develop, is dependent upon how we putting on those glasses that we wore 30 and 40 and 50 years ago, and understanding how important it is to be a child and how sacred a school is to letting them learn how to be small human beings. So I am enormously opposed to the prospect of putting police in schools, not because police are bad, not because police can't be role models. I absolutely support a police officer coming on their lunch break and throwing a football around on the campus, or playing basketball with the kid, or coming monthly even to do a presentation about what it's like to be a police officer. I hope little brown and Black children who go to this school want to be police officers. We need them to be. But this is not a place for PR for police. This is not a place where police are going to learn to be social workers and mental health workers and child counselors. That is not their function, and they do not do that. As much as they'll tell you, I love kids and I'm great on the playground, when it comes time to discipline, they will do it in the way police are taught. And teachers actually need to step up. And I'm speaking to the two who came, and I appreciate you coming. You need to step up, and you need to get and ask for training from the district. Ask for people to come in and teach you new sets of skills on how to discipline children in a way that helps children behave in a way that you want, there'll be the chair's decision in a moment, and to get those types of skills. And you may say to me that you've done those things and that you have needs beyond that. That's a different conversation still. Police should not be what we resort to do this. That is not their function. And so I appreciate listening to everyone else and everyone else who's spoken up till now, comments on this, and I know that everybody here means well, and so my words are not pointed at anyone with shame or ridicule, but with the hope that people will stop and think about what I've hopefully planted as some seeds and recognize that as a community we can do better. And this board is really actually a sacred place. We don't look like it, but very few communities put their city council and their school board together to discuss important issues. And we're small enough of a community to do right by kids, and this is an example of one of those places where together we can. We just have to stop and put politics aside and think about what it actually means to be a child.
Thank you, Member Bowders. Is there any other discussion? Yes, Councilmember Martinez.
Madam Chair, I'd love to hear what you think, and Member Merriam, we haven't heard from you both on this issue.
Sure. Well, I have to admit that I'm, this is the start of the thought process for me as well. Both my parents were in law enforcement, but I'm also a, pretty well-off white woman, so that certainly is something that I'm very conscious of, and so I do understand that for a lot of people, their relationship with police officers is a very negative one. Mine has never been, and so I'm very conscious of that. And my significant other is a person of color, and we do not have kids yet, but we intend to have kids. So it's something I think about a lot as to, how will my children's experience be different than my own, and I suspect it will be very different. So that's where I come at this issue right now, and I appreciate all the input, and Member Bowders, I appreciate your perspective. I understand that Member Vargas spoke to the PTO, and there was some definite interest, and I understand a lot of those parents were people of color as well. So again, my perspective is still sort of one of exploration, and I hope that we can continue to have this discussion as a community on a broader forum as well.
All right. Just some brief comments here. What I'm getting from this is that is there really a need for one? And I think that's what we're trying to grapple with right now. Is it because issues that arise on the campus? Is it because of perceived issues that arise up on the campus? I'm still grasping with that, because I think maybe some of the instances that have occurred in the past where the police have been on the campus, it's been an eye-opener as far as how we've reacted. And I don't know how we are wrapping around it. Do you install an SRO for that reason? I'm still in the exploratory stages of that. Is it a public relations issue with the police profession and how they're perceived amongst the community and the students especially? So I think that's something that we really need to explore. And as far as other means of handling issues on the campus, because you have a resource officer or you don't have one, I think it's talked upon as far as restorative justice, as far as that could be done locally and with the tools that we can provide to staff and the students to use. So here again, is that this is a discussion that's worth another time to discuss more of. So I'm not gonna, grandstand on either side, but I appreciate every member of the board here as their comments and their insight. Thank you.
And I do want to thank you, everybody, for coming here with an open mind on this subject. And thank you also for expressing openness to holding potentially a town hall. I think that would be a great next step. In retrospect, I do feel like this discussion went a little bit sideways, and I think it's because we haven't defined the scope of what we're asking. And we're making very dangerous assumptions on this because, again, we don't have the scope. So I think, to me, that a very natural next step would be to define the scope, primarily from, I would think it would be John, who would help us define what it is that we're looking to, what the ask is, whether it's a full-time person, a full part-time person, or whether it's just implementation of programs or re-allowing the force to establish programs, which I know they have a lot of appetite and experience in. And I also feel like we spoke about, I just want to caution everybody on an issue of replicability. Just because something didn't work elsewhere doesn't mean it necessarily we'll expect the same results here. And that sort of actually works in both ways, either for the pros and the cons in having a resource here. I'm not an expert. I'm an expert on this, but I do trust and I am following the recommendations and the appetite and the desire from the parents that I've spoken to. And that is the reason why we brought this item here. And I do believe that parents do know what's best for their kids. And I think that it's my role or my responsibility to try to bring that forward. So I would like to recommend that we do, as the next steps, if there's consensus, that we do first start with defining the scope of what it is that we're looking for, and then to hold a town hall.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to reflect that at the beginning of the meeting, Member Vargas, you represented that the majority of the board was in favor of an SRO, but I don't, and then you advertised that we would be able to hear that tonight. I don't feel like that's what I heard from your colleagues. I feel that they have some issues to grapple with, whether yes or no, this is an issue, this is something that they would like to bring forward. So I just wanted to note that. In terms of town hall, I said I was in favor of a town hall. I did not hear any other members of the city council say they were in favor of that. So I would not represent that the majority of us said that.
And to clarify, as a school board member, I am not in favor of having a resource officer on campus, and I'm actually not in favor of investigating it. It was not an agenda item that we discussed as a school board. It was something that Vargas announced that he had gone to a PTO meeting, and then it was then asked to be on a future agenda item. Consensus for future agenda items are pretty loose and casual. So it was asked to be put on a future agenda item, and a couple of people said sure. I don't think the energy of looking into it or directing Dr. Rubio to investigate or arrange anything, I think our energies would be better spent on educating our children and asking Dr. Rubio to put more energy into academic performance and issues that actually we should be looking at. That's, as a school board member, I would just like to say we have discussed it as a school board, and Member Vargas definitely does not speak for me.
Yes, Member Bowders.
I think Mr. Katz was first. Sorry.
Well, and I'm probably going to speak for you here. I apologize. I don't know what it was in my remarks that led to the impression that I had an open mind on this, and I want to apologize for that. I want to make it very clear. I'm opposed to it, and I sometimes speak inclearly, and I'm sorry for that, but I do not support it. I don't think we should do a town hall. It's not a good idea. So.
I have a couple points I just want to offer back to Member Vargas. One, you have talked about asking the superintendent to assist in identifying what the scope of the ask would be, and I would like to offer back to you that you have not articulated what your need is, why there is a need, what the need is. If the issue is that you have discipline issues on campus, I would direct you to groups like Impact Justice or Community Works, other organizations that help deal with behavioral issues in a setting that allow children to still be children, teach them actually life skills about how to hold themselves and others accountable. If your issue is that there is a need to simply have a police officer here on the campus, I would proffer you that I have not heard a single council member think that that's a good idea. So it would be a political adventure for you to hold some sort of meeting to do what we have told you is not of interest to us. And so if you have a need, I would be happy to have a conversation with you if the school board in future discussions defines an actual need. Saying that you had a meeting with parents and that they were interested in it and want it, or with teachers who are interested in it and want it, isn't sufficient for me. It's not sufficient for a few reasons. One, if I got everything I wanted, I wouldn't be here. I'd be somewhere far away from here, probably. So the reality is that what we have to do as elected people is be responsible with resources and time, and not search for problems with what we think are solutions that would be great for us to use. Lastly, you mentioned that parents were supportive of it, and I actually don't doubt that for a second. That's the most common statement I hear when I visit with schools or communities that say, well, the parents wanted it. And it's usually because they don't know what the alternatives are. You haven't presented them, you haven't identified a problem as a group to solve, and you haven't presented them with what the alternatives are. And most parents, when they hear that there are ways to help children learn skills that don't put their own child or other children in their community, because they're bound to each other, especially in ethnic communities, they're bound to each other by virtue of their status. I appreciate what you said. I really appreciate what you said. I am from a place of privilege. I grew up in a poor, rural community, but by virtue of the color of my skin, I am privileged. No matter, I've been homeless, I am privileged. And we don't appreciate what it means. There's not one, barring Member Vargas and Member Martinez, there's not one real person in this room who understands the day-to-day perspective of being a person of color. And we have to give people their own voice. And that does not mean putting police officers in to help people solve all their problems. They need to learn that they can solve their problems themselves, that they have power, their voice matters, their community can be determined by their own choices. And so I would just offer that I know you want to move forward with this and you want to have a town hall, and I'm not out here to upstage you on this. It seems extremely premature to seek or request that, because I don't think you've identified a need, I don't think you have identified a problem, and I don't think you have examined all the options and solutions that exist in a meaningful way and resource that to the parents of students in this community in a way that parents can say, this is something we actually need, we need to solve this problem, and these are the options. So I think this is all premature.
So, Member Bowders, to give you a couple of numbers, because I left these off because I tend to get bogged down in them. The suspension rate at the high school reported last year was below 3%. So that equates to 5 kids that had a discipline problem so severe it rated them missing school. To me, I go back to what you were saying about identify the problem. The second piece that I looked at was attendance. The school reports over a 95% attendance rate. Attendance is not a problem. I don't think we get that at city school meetings. So I'm just going to throw that out there. When you, Member Vargas, when you're looking to identify the problem, keep those numbers in mind.
Thank you.
I'd just like to close this out by saying that I certainly don't appreciate this issue being politicized. I think it is the desire of parents that this happen. I feel that my conclusion from here is that the majority of the people in this table today are out of touch with parents, and I do welcome and I do recommend that everybody come and speak to parents of our school. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for that discussion. We're going back now to item 5, action items, and this is the discussion of the city school mission and purpose. And a sub-point is rules and procedure, including meeting frequency.
Just for everyone's awareness, I have something coming around, which is a one-pager I just got done around 3 or 4 p.m. today. Just a little bit more background information to try to be helpful. We really did some digging in our archive folders above the gym, and I shared, I think, with Pedro just a few days ago or last week that one thing we found. Well, actually, one thing we found out that one of the former superintendents who was able to get back in touch with us, who facilitated the first joint meeting on April 4th, 1990, read a speech that he dropped off to us, and we're glad that he's still around and able to do that for us. And he alluded to some things that he saw in the purpose, and I think he actually shared it. Member Davis had just gotten on the city council at the time, so it was a while ago. And then one of our attorneys who was involved in the creation of the JOA looked at the JOA for us to point out what the JOA is able to lend, we think, in terms of the purpose of the joint committee as the governance committee. And then I added a little blurb from him at the bottom. So it's meant to be helpful. It's not meant to, it doesn't mean that certainly it's your choice if you want to go beyond this, but this is just meant to be additional information if it helps the conversation.
On that note, because I was surprised by the non-attachments, there wasn't much on here. I took the liberty of doing the same thing and spending some quality time trying to figure out purpose and procedures. So what I went ahead and did, and I have some for the audience as well because that's the way it's supposed to work. I copied pages 4 and 5 of the JOA, which talks about the purpose and goals. And then I went ahead and looked at the policy from the City Schools Committee and printed those out as they align with the goals. So I'm going to go ahead and pass these down. And so you don't have in your packet because I created these. So, and then there should be some extras for members of the audience who'd like a copy. I think I sent too many that way. Oh, here we go. Here's more. Because I think this is really an important conversation. Oh, okay.
Member Pedro, are there any more from Member Pats? We ran out on our end.
Yep.
Yeah.
So how many do you need?
From Member Pats. I think we got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Member Pats, can you explain a little more what it is that you just passed out to us?
Happily, yeah. So the first page is just, I try to save paper when I can. So the first page is pages 4 and 5 of the JOA. And I copied that because if you look at item T, it talks about the guiding principles that were adopted back in 2010. And then, I put numbers on the pages at the bottom in my handwriting. So page 2 really outlines what those guiding principles were: equity, partnerships, wellness, community engagement, and then on page 4 was community engagement appeared twice. And then if you go through, these are City Schools Committee policy numbers. They should have put it written in the bottom, but they put it at the top, I think, when they were adopted. I got these off of the ECCL website. I don't know if you knew there was an ECCL website, but there is. And so these were adopted at previous city schools meetings, and it just explains what they mean by partnerships, what they mean by community engagement, wellness, my personal favorite, equity, and then I put on sustainability, which was adopted because I just want to appreciate what Member Martinez has done around our waste stream. So that is what I've passed out.
Why don't we take public comment if there's any? A little more time. Okay.
Took a guess that 20 would be enough, and I think if I count the room, I got it.
Okay, so I'm just finding out about this right now. I'm kind of trying to go through all this paperwork, and so I'm not exactly sure what was being discussed here, but I can see here it's meeting frequency, and then talking about the history of the city schools committee. It appears to me that seems as this is my impression, that the school district is asking the city council, the school board is asking the city council to have less frequent meetings, seems like. If I'm wrong, I'd like to be corrected on that. I can speak now to what I see as the optics here, or like the psychology. The city of Emeryville used to be the city hall used to be what I would call highly dysfunctional. And the city and the school district also highly dysfunctional. But time marches on, and the city of Emeryville is now what I would call no longer highly dysfunctional. It's got some problems, but I think it's functioning, a well-functioning city hall. The school district, however, is still highly dysfunctional, and what I'm seeing here is this, I'm doing some psychoanalysis, amateur psychoanalysis. I'm seeing that the school board is feeling the heat from the city council because it's sort of amateur hour on the school board, and the way I'm perceiving this is the school board doesn't like to be spoken to like that, and doesn't like to be dressed down, and so your reaction is to run away. This is sort of what I'm saying. So you want to meet less frequently, and so correct me if I'm wrong. That's my impression of what is agenda item under discussion right now, which is 5.1. So meet less frequently, says the school board, and that's how I perceive the psychology here. Thank you.
Do members of the audience need a little additional time, or?
Just very little time to look at this, but I'm looking at community engagement, page 4. And I'm just struck by what the goals are here. The third indentation down is develop a specific plan for soliciting community input and participation. And then we have workshops and meetings, ongoing community engagement activities. I certainly think this is a great goal and a great vision, and any meeting that I've ever come to has been attended by practically no parents, maybe a couple of community members, maybe occasionally a couple of teachers. I don't know of any activities that are planned by this group to engage the community in any way. And so if I am wrong, please correct me, but that just struck me as one thing that is very valuable and that is very lacking. Thank you.
And I don't know if it's helpful, but just for everyone's knowledge, I mean, some of these were developed over the years. I appreciate Member Patz's intent. But to answer the last speaker's question, this particular one, if you notice in the first bullet, was developed for community engagement and the design of the school. So a lot of this happened over the years, but I don't know if that helps speak to what your question is. Some of these have been developed over the years, and partly to make sure there was a lot of engagement in the design of the facility.
Forgive me, I'm horribly jet lagged, so I'm not doing so well. But regardless of the community engagement piece here, if we look at LCAP and we look at some of the other educational requirements, community engagement's really important, key stakeholders, it's really important, making a place for families, incredibly important. And as I always say, like a dripping tap, that relationship-based learning, relationship-based interactions, and making families feel welcome regardless. And I think once you have relationships and they're strong, whatever issues are arising, they're more easily resolved. And I'm hoping, if I recall, you have 8 wellness areas, and I think they possibly need a revisiting to make sure they're part of the infrastructure and part of the thinking. So I would really like to see ways for more family engagement. For example, have pizza at your meetings, have water at your meetings. You might get families here. Have people who can look after the children. You get more people come if we just took a little time and thought about how we can support families so that they can be part of the conversation. Okay, thank you.
Any additional public comment? All right, we'll move into discussion by the board, the committee. I can start. I think it's important to have this discussion. I hope everyone agrees with that. I have to say that I would love to have a great relationship with the city council, but I don't feel like we're there yet. I think that the discussion we just had was very productive, but up until that discussion, a lot of the meetings we have, I just feel a lot of hostility towards individual members and what we're doing. And so I come into this meeting with that perspective, those feelings, and I find it hard for us to have a productive relationship with that sort of background. So again, I thought our discussion today was very productive, and everyone was very respectful, and I appreciate that, but that doesn't seem like it's been the norm up until tonight. So with that said, it is my intention to come into this meeting and talk about limiting the scope of this relationship, because again, it doesn't feel productive to me. It doesn't feel useful. It doesn't feel like we're accomplishing much. It's just it feels like a lot of hostility and a lot of finger pointing, and I don't think we're getting a whole lot done with that sort of mentality.
I would just politely add, if I might, that I'm not sure everybody was respectful tonight. So, I mean, except for Member Bowder so far, who was at another level, in my opinion, I saw tonight people judging, a city council member judging the school board for their actions. I heard another member of this committee say to another member, "I'm sorry you didn't understand." I just think that the comment from the community member was so great that this is an exquisite place for relationship building. And I believe, I don't know if I misinterpreted it, but I believe they were referring to adult relationships between us. And I don't mean to speak out of turn, because I think this is something for you as the council and board to figure out. But I just want to echo that the level of disrespect and unprofessionalism that occurs sometimes in our meetings, and separately in the city council meetings about the district, or separately, and I'm certainly part of that as well. I would like to see us all operate the way Member Bowders operated tonight, who went above and beyond to say he was not here to shame and ridicule, and his tone was very professional. So I hope we can all operate in that way.
Point of personal privilege?
I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. I grant it.
Thank you. So I'm not sure I understand your role in saying that. It seems to me that you are an agent of this board, and to offer an opinion as to how members of this board do their jobs, who are, well, most of us are elected officials, and it just strikes me as way outside of your role here. And the nice part of this, well, I'm just going to say that I did not say he did not understand. I said I was not clear.
I wasn't referring to you about that comment.
Okay, well, that's good to know. But yeah, this is the way this works, and so I take a challenge at you deciding to highlight good members versus bad members and what is or is not there, particularly on this evening, to highlight it as professionalism or otherwise. I find that odd, particularly because I think, you know, anyways, I'm going to leave it at that, and I'll wait my turn to have the discussion on this.
Member Martinez.
I'm sorry, are we not having discussion yet? We are at discussion, right?
So we had public comment.
Okay.
We're on discussion now.
I would just like to publicly apologize if I made this feel personal, any discussion tonight. As a parent in this community and as a parent at this school, talking about certain issues does bring out some emotions in me. And again, there's nothing personal. I certainly don't want to feel any tension with any member of council, board, staff. I hope, Bailey, I hope you and I can have coffee sometime so we can dispel any type of tension. But that's certainly not what I'm trying to convey. However, I am really glad that we have this forum to have the difficult discussions that we need to have. Feelings aside, I think that the conversation that we had tonight was very important. I certainly wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I apologize to anyone. Cruz, if you felt disrespected by me, I'm giving you my public apology. But I think that, and this is what I said in our city council meeting, that I know, Dr. Rubio, you provided a video of that meeting to the board, so you may have seen this. But I think that this is an opportunity for us to share areas where we have common ground. Member Pats was kind enough to share with us some of our policies, and I was really happy I hadn't seen this sustainability policy before. But I think that's an issue that's near and dear and important to me, and I think every day that we're not implementing our highest and best way of executing the waste stream, I think it's an opportunity lost. So I look forward to updating you all on the progress on that issue. Certainly the health, well-being, and safety of the children and families who come to this campus is something that I think is an important conversation that we should continue to have. And I think actually making the meetings more infrequent is not going to do anything for our relationship. I think, you know, having more frequent meetings actually, or meetings as they're designated, I think is proper. And I wanted to take a moment to appreciate the suggestion from a member in the audience, and later in the meeting, I'd like to suggest that City Council find a way to help with providing pizza and childcare and advertising these city school meetings. Because I would have loved to have a parent in this community at this meeting tonight who wasn't me. A parent who thank you, there is a parent here, about a parent who's in the district as well, and I know that their parent who is here formerly had a child in this district and pulled the child out because didn't think the district was adequate for his child. I would have loved to have this conversation in front of more parents. So those are my comments.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll be brief. Bailey and I had a disagreement about what to have on the agenda. And that, you know, we're co-chairs. And we have a structural problem being co-chairs. Normally the chairs would make the final decision on the agenda, but we had a disagreement. How do we resolve that? And I think it would be good to know what the law says about this entire group here and what controlling documents are about this and understand it. And I don't intend to go over that in this meeting, but you know, I know that in order for our community to make this facility, Assemblywoman Nancy Skinner, now State Senator Nancy Skinner, had to get the state of California to make a special bit of law that it would allow this to happen. And you know, I think we are unusual in our existence and what we have going on here. Normally the state separates the school districts and the city councils, absolutely. But no, we have something different. And I think we need to just to study what the law says about this, who controls what. You know, if we have a disagreement about what's on the agenda, how would that really be settled? So, you know, if we can get some base understanding of where we stand, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. And I want to piggyback a little on something Councilmember Martinez said. You know, the City Council had as an agenda item in June or July, I believe it was June, we discussed the purpose of our role in this. And it was a very good discussion. We have different points of view among us, but one of the things I'd like to offer is, you know, as I mentioned in the last agenda item, I think it's really important in a very small community, coming from a small community that was smaller than this, it is really important for the city and the schools to get along. And I think we need to find a way to do that. I think the people who live here deserve that. They deserve that. And so I just want to offer that I personally am available to any school board member, you know, and a couple of them have taken me up on it, but I'm available to grow our personal relationships as people with the vision of having the work we do together be as collaborative and as productive as possible, because in the end, the Emeryville Center of Community Life is for the whole community. It's for everybody. And so we owe it to everybody who entrusts us with this responsibility to fulfill that responsibility as best as possible. And so I think the two things I would like to see are, one, if a majority of the people here feel that this venture is still worth trying for, because if people don't, and I understand with very good reason why some may not, and I don't judge their views for that, but if people don't think it is worth our time or effort, we should abandon the spectacle of what we are doing at times, to some of the comments that were made, in favor of doing what each of us need to do. And if we are willing to do it, then I would recommend that we find a way, to the mayor's question about scope. This isn't a very heavy law issue, Mr. Mayor. The law that created the physical space is separate from this committee's guidelines and originating documents, and we can disband this community by the simple majority vote of either of these two bodies that are together today. So I would suggest that we form some form of working group, which might be the most productive thing for this body, to dig deeper on the questions that are posed by this, and to come back and perhaps mutually present solutions for us to consider. Those are my comments.
Councilmember Pats.
So I have two things. First, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting past 7:30.
I'll second.
Yeah. Somebody else pointed, Member Martinez.
Missed it last time.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, let's continue.
Okay. So there are a couple of things for me here. First and foremost, while I appreciate Member Bowders and Member Martinez's style and collegiality, I'm very passionate about this, and I do take this very personally. I asked for a few things to be on the agenda tonight. I wanted to talk about test scores. I wanted to talk about our enrollment. And I want to do that for a simple reason of the history of this program. Emory Unified is in a unique position. It is in a small town, yes, but it's in a very densely populated area. And we have had our troubles, but we've had a lot of financial problems. And the school has gone on more than one occasion to the city to help out. And the ECCL was born out of two things. One, an idea of a community center, but the other on how do we make the money work. The city had leased the pool from the school to give them a backdoor way to get money. We gave about $1 million or $2 million, I don't remember at this point. And then we reworked that lease for the ECCL to waive that debt. And we did this time and again, and I'm missing some back times because I don't want to go too far back when the district has gone belly up, but we've done this because we keep saying education is the key. It is how we change the lives of the people who live in town. And we keep doing this over and over and over again, and we don't get any results. And the reason we don't get any results is because it is so hard to find parents who are willing to send their kids to Emory schools when they live in Emeryville and have a choice. Half of the district, I'm guessing because I couldn't get the numbers this evening, but half the district doesn't live in the district. The demographics of Emeryville look nothing like the demographics of Emory Unified. And that's fine. We're a school. We'll serve the kids who show up. But where I run into problems and where I get upset and where I have been frustrated is we don't serve the kids that show up. It used to be a point of pride that, hey, at least we're better than Oakland. But we're not. We are now below Oakland. And because I'm Mr. Handout tonight, and I'll send more to the audience, I asked for the test scores to be on the agenda, and that was a point of embarrassment, I assume, for the school. And so you didn't want to talk about it tonight. But for me, that's the purpose of this meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to educate kids. And so what I have just sent out is my interpretation of the data, not interpretation, that's the wrong word, my reporting out of the data from the state website. It was released a week ago. And the challenge I have is if you look where we are before the ECCL, we ranked above several of our neighbors.
Point of order, is this germane to anything that's on the agenda?
Yeah, it's to the purpose of the school.
Okay.
So to me, it's a big challenge. And I don't want to give up meeting and talking about this, and I'm not going to play nice until we start fixing the problem. And the problem is that we are sending kids out into the world not prepared. Our graduation rate is concerning. Our test score rates are abysmal. And so to talk about the purpose of this meeting, I'll tell you, it's the care and welfare of our kids. The guiding principles are right there. And, you know, we can look at it from an equity perspective. We can look at it from a collaboration perspective. But I think we have to admit where we are. And right now, we're at the bottom. So, you know, I'm all for let's having these conversations. But as an elected official in this town, I'm not willing to tell the people here, you're never going to have a school you can send your kids to. We've committed time, energy, and money to create a school that people who live in Emeryville can send their kids to. And I'm speaking not only for my neighbors, but I'm speaking for myself. I don't send my son here. I live next door to a school in Emeryville, and I don't send him there. And that bothers me. It's why I got on the school board. It's why I'm on city council. I want a community that we can have families and events in. And if you want people to show up, they show up to the school board meetings where their kids go to school. They have a difficult time traveling here to send their kids. And I'm really curious to see, we've spent all this money, energy, and effort. I'm really curious to see, where's the payoff? Has enrollment gone up? I don't think so. Have test scores gone up? No. What's left, right? So I'm really excited you guys are working on your district goals, and I'll come talk about that at that time. But for this committee, right now, kids, as Member Bowder said earlier, are our focus. And we've got to get there, because what I'm seeing on paper offends me as a citizen, as an elected official, and mostly as an educator, because to go from bad to the worst is atrocious and unacceptable. And this committee, that should be our topic. But I'm done.
I would just like to respond to one thing before you speak, Council Member Martinez. The reason that we did not put the enrollment and the test scores on the agenda was not out of embarrassment. It is, quite frankly, it's not your job to do that. It is the school board's job to raise test scores, to make sure enrollment is where it needs to be. And this goes back to what I said at the beginning, but I do not feel that the city council is a partner with the school district in improving those things. It feels like you want to bring up these topics at the meetings in an attempt to embarrass us and to shame us into doing something. Well, I will tell you, we are working very hard, and I don't appreciate what I perceive as efforts to embarrass us or put us on the spot. That's not what a partner does. Member Martinez.
Member Pats, if this were to be in our purview of this group, to the chair's point, I'm wondering what constructive conversations you think we could have with the city partnering with the school board to improve the situation.
That's a great question, and I'm happy you asked it. I don't want to drift too far away from this topic, but I think there's a lot we can offer, right? We can talk about how we can bring in some programs for after school. I've brought Aim High. I know Barbara has brought it back. I'm still waiting for that conversation. I think we can talk about how we advertise. We can talk about a lot of things, but we have to have those conversations. We can talk about city services. We can talk about what we're doing with all the new construction in town. There's a lot of knowledge that comes and a lot of things that we can bring to this table, and we can build on the programs that are successful, but you have to be able to admit where we're at. And if it's embarrassing where you are, I'm sorry, but that's where you are, and to have the conversation and to get there, we have to be able to talk about that.
I'm not embarrassed by where we are, and I think that it is where we are, and that's the starting point. I just don't appreciate what I feel is an attempt to embarrass us and to call us out.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest problem, is I do not feel that there is a partnership here.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other piece. The enrollment piece is critical for us as a city, because we plan programming and I'm making budgeting decisions, and I don't know how many kids are here. That's a challenge. So.
Councilmember Medina.
Chair, I'd like to speak to some things that were addressed earlier about how we're all getting along. Frankly, your individual feelings are not important. The children of the school district are important. The residents you were elected or appointed to represent are important. This meeting needs to be governed by Robert's Rules of Order. Not everyone needs to feel great about how they were spoken to. We should all, as electeds and as professionals, strive to treat each other well and be responsible, but we care deeply about these issues because the reason why we do this work is not because we like being here at 7:30 on a Thursday, but because it's important and it does affect people's lives. Now, point of order should be ruled by the chair. I would appreciate if this meeting were run by Robert's Rules from here on out. I think we'd get through a lot more. And I'd like to focus this discussion on the topic at hand. Councilmember Bowders asked how many people want to continue this committee, and brought up that we could simply dissolve it if we think it's a waste of time. How about we do a straw poll on that? Everyone okay with that? Yeah, I agree. Great. Who's in favor of keeping this committee going? Okay. Now let's talk about how we can do that well.
I'm just doing a quick thing here. I'm looking at 3 items here under this city school background information. I'm seeing 1 and 2 already addressed. Number 3 is what we're wrangling with. With that in mind, it's very narrow in scope. I don't think we have to wander off into unknown territory regarding that item, but I believe that that's what we concentrate as far as the reason why we meet. I think we already handle 1 and 2 with regards to our operations and maintenance. And then as far as recommendations of O&M capital replacement, we do that on a quarterly basis, I believe, or at least a semi-annual basis in the school district. So I think we concentrate on item number 3. do want to add one more thing. The first 2 pages here of what Member Pats gave out are basically from the JOA, but this is the criteria they use to form the ECCL. And as far as it being applied to, in my opinion, it doesn't see it's actually applicable to what we're doing right now.
Yes, go ahead.
I would like to say that it's very applicable, because when this building was built, there were a lot of promises, there were a lot of ideas that the type of engagement would continue, that the progress of the entire site would continue, that things would grow and change, and that it's not just getting a building built. When people decided whether they wanted a library or not, that was, you know, what you're talking about, right? That these meetings and this stuff only applies to the building or the site. But it goes along with the idea of the site. And that idea of the site is ever changing. It's an ongoing entity that needs to continue to have a communication and an outreach, and all of these ideas, you know, they're not stagnant. They're not dead just because a building is built.
Any additional discussion?
I don't have a problem with the scope as outlined here, but I do think we need to flesh out the process of how things go on the agenda, because I think that's been a point of contention all around.
I'm sorry, what was that? Oh, yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Councilmember Medina. So this is an action item, and I would, since I sense the hour is late, and I appreciate all the input everyone has provided, and it feels like there's a need to do something. And so I'm going to make a motion to do something, and we can do it or not. But I am going to motion that we create an ad hoc committee that will be convened by the 2 co-chairs, and each co-chair, since each co-chair will select or nominate a member of their respective body to join them. And along with the 2 administrators we have here, perhaps we can have this come back at one of the next 2 agendas as with some clarification around the items you've heard tonight around scope, around issues with the rules. I'm hearing there are issues with agenda setting is what I heard predominantly, but perhaps not define it, but more specifically than purpose, scope, and rules. And so my motion will be that the co-chairs of this committee, provided I understand how you feel, I saw how you voted, but my hope is that the feelings you have about this, I'm sad to hear how you feel. And so my hope is that you will consider this motion and give it a chance so that we can try. And so that will be my motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
I must say I will somewhat reluctantly also vote in favor and join the ad hoc committee.
So
All opposed?
point of clarification. My understanding is that this body doesn't necessarily have the authority to do that. We have to bring it back to City Council to ratify. Am I wrong in that? I'm sorry. I always get
To do
confused
what?
on- I'm under the impression as this committee doesn't have the ability to take any actions,
Well,
and so.
we just did. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No, it's a genuine question.
No,
I don't have an
I was
opinion
trying
one way or
to
the other.
I'm trying to learn from
it
you
was
and
taken as
interject
such.
humor as you do to me at council all the time.
Yeah. And it was taken in that way.
Okay, great. The group, we can't approve anything, right?
Right.
So what it would be that this would be a small work group that would come back to this body with ideas that are still a little rough around the edges, that as a group we could say, okay, yeah, that works for me or not. So maybe the work group comes back and says this body meets quarterly, right? That's an example. And the group together, we could say, no, we really want, the majority of us want every other month, but the point being is that you would have received all the feedback in a public meeting, and then you go back and vote at your own, yes.
Yeah, that was just my clarification,
Okay.
is that we have the authority to do this.
I
And I just
believe
don't want to
you.
miss our next meeting if we can, I voted for this, I'm all for it. I just want to
Okay.
make sure that we follow the rules, and I don't want to give Carolyn not enough time to get it on agenda for us at City Council. That's
Yeah, as
my
long as it's
concern.
only 2 members of each board, it's not a violation of the rules. I did some homework with Mr. Gina on this, so my understanding is we are okay.
As long as you talk to Michael, I'm happy.
Yeah.
We're at item 7, future agenda items.
Actually, can I ask for clarification? For
Certainly.
setting the next agenda, are we just going to put this one item to discuss?
My ask would be, and I'm open to other people's input, but my ask would be that when the co-chairs leave here, at some point in the next few days, they will sit with the administrators, determine who else, they'll decide who they want to bring on to participate with them, and I think at that point, when they kind of examine the scope, they can recommend that it's either ready for the next meeting or the meeting after that. I would not tie their hands and say, come back in October, or what's October, November, or December. I would say if they feel like this needs till January to be worked on, I don't want to constrain good work with an artificial deadline, especially when they haven't had a chance to talk about that. So my motion is open-ended just to do it, and that we could put on the agenda as a placeholder for next time, a report back on the status of that group, so that it's not necessarily the discussion, but just what they've done, who they've convened, and what they're working on. So
I guess the question would be for the November meeting and what items get on that agenda.
Oh, I think that number 7, she's calling for that right now. Future agenda items, I think she's asking what
Okay.
people want.
If there was an impasse again, then I want to make sure if there's a process how we're going to get past that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I think you still have to deal with the rules that we have in place right now. Unless there's no change to the rules tonight. Nobody's made a change to the rules.
Excuse me, Pedro, are we scheduled for a meeting in November?
The next regular meeting would be in November.
Okay. Does this committee wish to delay that until some work is done to bring back to this committee? Is it essential that we meet again in one more month? Is there some latitude there as far as making significant progress on this one agenda item?
That does seem pretty soon, right around the corner, in fact. I would recommend that we push the meeting to December or January so that we can really work out this issue in advance of the next meeting.
I think it's not unusual for us to go 2 months.
I support
as
January
well.
because
The next regular meeting would
yeah.
be January.
Okay.
I support January because a lot of the regular city groups and regional groups that we sit on have an amended December and November calendar, and so most of the things that if you have a 3rd or 4th week regional committee in November or December, they tend to be the 1st or 2nd week of December instead.
Yeah.
So I would just say maybe January is better for us.
In defense of Pedro, we're off cycle. We should have met in September, but that wasn't good, and so we moved it to now. So I think January's
Point
fine.
of clarification, are we canceling our next meeting and then meeting again in January?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes,
I'll move to that if that's what's needed.
I'll second that.
Go for it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, so we will cancel our November meeting and reconvene again in January with the first regular meeting of 2018.
I do have an agenda item for that meeting. I would really like to have an update on how the wellness is going, staffing there, and really at this point we should be reaching out to the community, and so I'd like to know how we're doing on that, or if the wellness is still facing inward. And so I'd love to get some numbers and some actual update on what's going on. I know that's supposed to be on the cycle, but I don't remember when. So that's my request.
Any other requested agenda items?
I have one, not really a future, but I was just looking at this as this was a special meeting, right?
Yes.
Should we have allowed public comment for a special meeting?
Yeah.
I think we can. It's
Okay.
fine.
I just want to make
Yeah.
sure we're following the rules.
All right, moving on to item 8, There's no public comment for future agenda items. Item 8, announcements and member comments. Member Bowders, you have an item on lead poisoning prevention.
Yeah, so the city council had the benefit of hearing this on Tuesday, and I apologize to them for duplicating their time. I serve as the chair of the Alameda County Lead Poisoning Prevention Board. It's one of my roles on the council. And we received a report at the meeting at the end of September about lead poisoning at McClymonds High School. And the football team was commenting and reporting that the water tasted funny and it had a yellowish brown hue. And they had water testers come out and determined extremely high levels of lead were in the water. And an investigation revealed it was a combination of actually the water fountain head from the era that they were made contained lead in it, which is really sad actually to think about, and that there were some pipe joints as well. Now the ECCL is obviously new and does not have that issue, but as a courtesy, I put it on as an announcement, as a courtesy to the board and the district, just to let you know that should you be interested in testing either the Annie Yates or Ralph Hawley campuses because of the age of those structures, you should feel free to contact the Alameda County Healthy Homes Department. You can let them know that I advised you to do so, and we can arrange, I can work with staff there to arrange for someone to come out and test your facilities for you as a precaution if you wish to do that. Thank you. You're welcome.
Any other member announcements? Member Pats?
So I just want to remind people, since I want to say it's October 28th is the Harvest Festival. I don't know if you've made it out there. Did I get the date right?
Yes.
Good. I don't know if you've made it. Last year's was on this campus. It was amazing. The students were out there doing a great job. The city, I want to commend Pedro and his staff, did an amazing job. It was one of the better, well, I actually sampled several Harvest Festivals that year, and ours was by far the best. And that's a tribute to the PTO, to the student body, and to community services. I'll give a shout out to Stacy in particular. And I would recommend going, even if you don't have little ones. It's even more fun if you do. It's right here, and I'm really excited. I've heard there's signage up at Doyle Hollis, and so it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's a great way to recruit local families because these things are very well attended, and I'm good. So please go.
Yes.
I just wanted to give another shout out to the PTO and thank them for putting on another very fun and successful book fair, even under cramped circumstances. It's still going on before and after school. One more day, October 6th, and parents, if you can't attend the book fair, you can go to scholastic.com/BF/Annie Yates K8, I believe it is, and purchase books there, and those will benefit the PTO, and all of that money gets put back into the classroom. So also last night there was a movie right in this room, right? I understand Cruz was here with his family. My family was here. I wasn't. I was at a meeting. But it sounds like they had a great time, and so I'm really glad to hear about the facilities being used and loved by the community.
I have one thing as well. Oh, did you have something? Please. Oh, I have one thing as well, which is unlike council members Pats and Martinez, who always have the family wholesome events to speak to. The Emeryville, yeah, she's like, uh-oh. The Emeryville Celebration of the Arts kicks off tomorrow, and the point I raise in that is that if you are into libations, I'm the bar manager. I volunteer as the bar manager several years now for this event, and so 6 to 9 p.m. at the Emory Tech Building, 1475 66th Street. You should all come and visit me at the bar, which is, the event is family friendly, the bar is adult friendly, and we'll see you there.
Madam Chair, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I don't know if this would be the appropriate time to say this, but I just wanted to come back to the pizza and childcare idea. I don't know if that needs to be brought back to City Council, if we can support families and residents coming out to these meetings. I certainly would be in favor of having that discussion, or if that, certainly that's within your individual budget to make that happen. But if you would like to get feedback from us individually, however you'd like to do that, Carolyn. I think.
We will coordinate that
Yeah.
effort.
A great way to become closer to the parents and the people that attend this school is, for example, tomorrow you can attend the last day of the book fair, and there's opportunities to endorse a classroom or adopt a classroom. So teachers have set an envelope with their wish list of books, and they range from $5 to $15 each. And so it's an opportunity to give back, just like I did. And then just to expand on yesterday's note around the movie night, it was the most successful movie night that I've seen. There were close to 100 kids yesterday. It was quite impressive. I remember attending a couple of previous movie nights where there was maybe 10, 15 kids at the most. So it was great to see the principals here. It was great to see the teachers here, the PTO here. They were selling hot dogs and selling popcorn. And so we'll definitely get the word out for the next one so that you can all join us.
Can I make one more announcement?
Of course.
So we also have at the Senior Center the Oktoberfest. It's Friday, October 13th from 5 to 8 p.m. We're going to have German beer, food, and wine, and then German polka band and dancing. So at the Senior Center, it's open to all. Even though it's at the Senior Center, it's open to all.
So you're telling me I'm attending, okay.
Yes. 5 to 8,
Polka
October
challenge.
13th.
John, polka challenge.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned.